We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast, shooting your way out of debt.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I have a guest for you on this week's episode. Now, before I get to my guest, I do want to talk about our longtime sponsor, Sam Cohen with Attorneys First Insurance. Those of you that are newer listeners, first-time listeners, Sam writes errors and omissions insurance, or malpractice coverage, as we call it, for attorneys and title companies all over the state of Florida. I know he also focuses on Texas, and he can really do it anywhere in the country. So a great referral for Sam is if you know an attorney just starting his own law firm, or a title company just starting out, or even an attorney or title company that is renewing their malpractice coverage. That would be a great referral for Sam. You can connect them by emailing sam@attorneysfirst.com, or you can get more information at Sam's website, which is also attorneysfirst.com. And we thank Sam very, very much for his support of the show. Like I've said in previous episodes, if it's a change that you like, it was probably recommended by Sam. If it's a change that you don't think really works well, it's probably something I thought of. So thank you, Sam, for your support of the show. But I do want to get to my guest this week. So my guest is a guy I've known for a couple of years now. He is the owner of NTP2 Photography and Video, where they specialize in helping their clients brand themselves using custom photography and video production. He spends his free time with his 3 boys and his wife camping and hiking, and probably no surprise, does scouts with his boys. You can reach him on Facebook and Instagram. Both are NTP2 Photography. And so welcome my guest, Eric Bunch. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Sean.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick, Eric and I are also roommates at PodFest this year. So as we're recording, I think this episode will be out late February, maybe early March 2022. PodFest is at the end of May 2022, live, for the first time since COVID, back in Orlando. Eric and I will be rooming together. Eric, you're speaking at VidFest. I'm speaking at PodFest. And so if any of you listeners want to personally meet and network with me and Eric, go to podfestexpo.com and you can get all the ticketing and hotel information for PodFest Live 2022. And we can talk about VidFest if you want. We can talk about PodFest too if you want. The thing that was most interesting to me as we were talking is I don't have a lot of stories on the show very often about people who were in debt, who got out of debt, people that have handled their debt in a certain way. But you've got a pretty unique story around those types of issues. And thank you for sharing that with my audience, with the show here. So, I think the easiest way to start, one of the first things I picked up on, NTP2 Photography and Video. So I kept trying to think, well, his name is Eric Bunch, and there's no E or B. So is NTP someone's initials, or is it, and what's with the number 2? And so that may be the best lead in to what it is we're going to talk about. So how did you come up with the name NTP2 Photography?
Yeah, and just to clarify, a lot of people always ask me what it stands for. So it depends on whether they're a nice individual or not. So sometimes I mess with them about different, analogies. I've said it stands for Nancy, Tom, and Paul, just making stuff up before. So it just kind of depends who's out there. But I used to not really share a lot of my story about being in debt because I was embarrassed by it. I felt like I made, bad choices. And so there was a lot of aspects of it, especially when I was in debt, and I started sharing maybe in the last couple of years. A lot of people have asked me, how'd you start where you are? And I used to tell them, I still do. I used to drive for Uber Eats. I'd be out doing things and then I'd be driving for Uber Eats at night just to try to continue things on. I was always ashamed of it, like I was doing something wrong. But really, that's that just shows the drive that I had. But NTP2, it basically started, and Sean, you may not even know this. I went to school to become a automotive technician. So that's what I went to school for. That was my career, was being a mechanic. And so started doing that. And my parents worked at a retail store that my grandfather started called North Tampa Photography. And that's where the NTP comes from. So I started working there. I had the opportunity, this is around when the show Pawn Stars.
Yeah.
Pawn Stars was getting crazy popular. And then other shows with working with your family was getting really, really popular. And it was like, I wanted that. I was like, I want to work with my family. That looks really cool. Would I have done the same thing now? I don't know. But so that was really popular, was working with family. And so I was given the opportunity to basically leave my career as a mechanic and work at the photography store, knowing very little. And so I started there, started building a name for myself, started teaching myself how to do photography, how to do video. And part of the technology was changing over the years. But we continued on with the store, trying to build. We were doing classes. I was speaking at different organizations about photography, about video. And I was invited to a couple of boards and committees for different photography schools and programs. And so the store, with internet competition, it started dwindling down. And that's kind of the time that through there that we had to kind of step away and close the store down as it was struggling. And I think I had mentioned this in our pre-podcast interview, but I was working with my family. So my dad came up to me and said, hey, start advertising the service called NTP2. And I'm like, all right, what is that? And he said, well, we'll get to that, but just start advertising it, not knowing what it was. And so I started advertising that, coming soon, new service, stay tuned. Everyone thought it was like a new store being opened, but really they had no idea that the store was struggling. And so when he told me, he said, all right, you're going to go out and be a photographer for hire, and your salary is also disappearing. It was like a major blow. And it's not that, my dad was setting me up for failure. I mean, they carried me through there as long as they could, until the business was just hemorrhaging. It was really bad. And so I started doing photography for hire, and tried figuring out how to do that, all while, since my salary was disappearing and I was now having to support myself fully as a business owner, I was out there, driving for like Uber in the evening times and doing that. And basically my idea was, I said, I'm going to pay my mortgage and then everything else I can't afford. And that's what I did. And that's how I was already in debt. It's just the lack of basically salary, if you will, is what kind of prioritized, because someone told me, they said, you never stop paying your mortgage. Right. If you got to stop paying credit cards, like, you do what you got to do, but you never stop paying your mortgage. And so that's basically what I did. And that's how, I got into some serious debt.
Right. So I want to back up a minute, and a couple of questions that came to me. First is, do you think the mechanic background helps at all with the photography in terms of the equipment, or is it a car and a camera, apples and oranges?
No, it is very similar in the sense of, that's more my abilities. I am very technically smart, and as far as problem solving, engineering wise, mechanical. And so I take that knowledge, that skill set of mine, and I turn that into photography and video. So you've got, with different gear that's being set up, different lighting, different, technology. And so I just take that and solve a problem for someone's event or wedding or business, whatever I've got to do. So yeah, there's absolutely a correlation there. Obviously, fixing someone's engine and taking a picture of them for their headshot, that could be two totally different things, but overall it's a problem solving.
Right. And I was also thinking sort of in terms of, I assume if a camera breaks, there are specific companies out there that will repair or replace or whatever, but it's got to be helpful to have some form of mechanical background so that if something mechanical within the video camera, the camera, whatever breaks, at least there's some level of knowledge there for you to fix it before you got to take it to the professional to get repaired.
Oh, absolutely. And one service, I've been doing it for so long, and a lot of people don't know about it, is cleaning cameras. So cleaning the imaging sensor of a camera, because once they get dust on it, you get spots on the images. And I've cleaned thousands upon thousands of cameras, and so that's something else that mechanic side has helped me to do.
Right. One thing you said at the very, very beginning, and you mentioned it twice, that you were driving for Uber. And it's interesting because the episode previous to this week's episode was a guy I interviewed on mindset and mindfulness. And I've done a lot of other episodes, podcast episodes on mindset and your relationship with money and those types of topics. And one thing that was interesting that you said was that you felt like you were doing something wrong. And I didn't quite understand if the mentality was, I'm doing something wrong by driving for Uber, or I'm doing something wrong by being in debt, or maybe a little bit of both. What was sort of going through your mind at that point in time?
Oh, it was a little bit of everything. I mean, I felt that how could I go out and pose myself as I'm a professional photographer when I had these things in the background going on, and I felt like I was viewed as a failure. I had this debt that I was trying to figure out, and I had this family that I was trying to support, and basically I'd spend all day from 9 to 5, go out networking, meeting people, and then I'd get really excited to getting one job in a week. I'm like, oh, I got this really big job, and then in the evenings I was driving for Uber because I had to make money. I had to, continue on at least generating something. And so I always thought that people would view me as a failure because I was doing that. They would say, well, why would I hire you? You're not even doing well enough to even pay your mortgage, pay your credit cards. That was the mindset that I had.
And that was one of the things I was going to follow up on, is that I think a lot of people have that mindset unnecessarily. No one has to know that you're driving for Uber. I mean, I guess, and I don't say that in terms of driving for Uber is something that needs to be hidden. But I say that more from a perspective of it's really nobody's business. So you're a photographer, you're a videographer, you're a good photographer, you're a good videographer. Those skills stand on their own. You happen to drive for Uber as well at the time, or even still today, who knows? But at the time, maybe that's because you're trying to sock away money for the kids. Maybe that's because you're trying to sock away money to take a vacation, sock away money to buy investments, buy investment properties. Maybe it is trying to build up enough money to pay your credit cards, to pay this, to pay that. And I say that for people that are listening that may be in that same mindset that you were in, is that it's really nobody's business that you're driving for Uber. You're driving for Uber because you want to drive for Uber, and whatever it does for you, it does for you. There's no reason to have that negative mindset around it. You're, as a dad myself, you're doing what you need to do for your family. You're doing what you need to do to make ends meet and survive. But whether it's that, or whether it's I'm doing what I'm doing to put money in investments, who cares? What difference does it make?
Yeah. And I never even thought of it that way. Still to this day, I never thought of it that way. Society, has this definition of success, and when I was younger, when I was starting out my business, it's like I had a different view of what success looks like than I do today. And so that was really what kept me in that type of mindset of failing, was, the debt, the not having the support and things like that. I mean, if I would have had someone like yourself, I could have reached out to at the time, I would have known, then maybe things would have gone totally different.
And I think we'll get there. There's a happy ending. But one thing I also wanted to sort of touch on is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is that while all of this is going on, you've got NTP2 starting up, you're getting jobs, you're driving for Uber, you're doing all this stuff. at that point in time, you were already married and had kids. Yes.
Yes, that was kind of the reason for the transition into the photography store. Was my wife was pregnant with our first son, and so I needed something consistent. Being a mechanic, they pay on a not necessarily a commission, but they pay per job. So if there's no jobs coming through the door, they're not paying anyone. So it was very inconsistent with pay. And so, yeah, during this time, I had 3 kids that I was supporting and that were relying on me. So I had to do whatever I had to do.
Yeah. And again, for me to try to start to define success, you got a wife and 3 kids. That's, in my mind, you check whatever box you need to check to define success. There it is. You got a wife and 3 kids. Not to say that,
and one on the way. I don't know if you saw that on Facebook or not.
I think I did. Congratulations.
Thank
Although
you.
I can tell you what causes that, and
Yeah,
I've had it if you want.
I've had 2 people reach out to me and say, "Hey, do you know what causes that?"
We are officially done at 2. I think 2 is all I could handle at this point. Let's sort of continue on with the story. One thing that I love that you mentioned is that, I do what I got to do to pay my mortgage. If I can't pay my credit card bill this month, so what? And I've talked a lot on this show about secured versus unsecured debt. And you want to make sure you keep the roof over your head and your family's head. The credit cards, at least here in Florida, can't take your house away from you. But I've said to people before, you didn't get yourself into this hole overnight. You're not going to get out of it overnight. So how did you start to dig out of that hole?
So basically, when I stopped paying for the credit cards, there really was no catching up, or at least catching up quickly. It just went on for a couple of years where they were just full in collection. The account was closed. I couldn't do anything except for pay for the total balance. And so I got some support from a bankruptcy attorney, and I was looking into bankruptcy. That's what I was assuming I would have to do. And so the advice basically that I got was, well, the debt that you have is where it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was in the teens, as far as, so basically we just waited until they made offers on settling the debt. And I just took the settlement. And in some cases, I was settling for 30% of the balance. And so I just settled and eventually just took care of one after the other. Went through definitely a couple of years of having very, very poor credit. And that's where I wish that I would have had a little bit more support on my side, because maybe there could have been some things that could have happened where my credit was ruined anyways at that point. Maybe I wouldn't have even had to settle for 30%. I don't know. But that's basically the way I took care of it, was just doing settlement offers and then took care of them one at a time.
Yeah, that's a pretty good strategy. I mean, one issue that I would think would have come up had you moved down the road of considering bankruptcy is NTP2 Photography. I mean, a lot of times in bankruptcy court, the value of a business that you own has to be factored in. And even a lot of people say, well, if I stop shooting video and shooting photography, NTP2 is no more, because I'm the videographer, I'm the photographer, but it still has some value. It has cameras, it has video equipment, it has editing equipment, it has a computer, it has this, it has that. So it has some value to it. And I've talked a lot about valuing different businesses and companies on the show as well. So that, I think the way you handled it was perfect. And again, your comment about credit, when people find themselves in that situation, they're always worried about their credit. We all started with zero credit. Nobody gets credit on the day they're born. So you built it up once, you can build it up again. So, both really good points. So am I to assume, and I guess we can edit this out if I'm wrong, but am I to assume that today the debt is either zero or at least manageable, on a monthly basis, and you're back on track?
Yeah, really, any of the things that were outstanding are all taken care of, and they're all at zero. So There was about a year span where I did not have any credit cards. They wouldn't do anything, and so we've been very cautious of getting back into it. But our credit is 200 points higher than it was years ago. So yeah, everything now is back up. They can still find some of it, so it's not like I have a 750 or 800, but it's not like I have a 400 either. So yeah, things are definitely a lot better.
Well, and time heals credit. So the longer period of time goes on, the further away that we get, the better your score will be. And then, if you do, a lot of times I'll advise people, you get one or two credit cards, even if they're $1,000 balance, $1,000 max, $500 max, $2,000 max, whatever. You pay for gas and then you pay it off. You pay for groceries the next month, you pay it off. Those kinds of things will also bump up your credit score. So like I said, credit is something that will recover. Thank you. I know that a lot of times sharing the debt that you're in, not a lot of times, I would assume all the time, sharing the debt that you were in and how you got out of it is a difficult story, but congratulations on doing it. If there's someone listening that feels like they're in the same scenario that you're in, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, don't be ashamed. It's nothing to be embarrassed by. I felt that way. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed, and it was at one of the various meetings that we did, Sean, during the lockdown, that I finally felt like I need to share my story and what happened with me, because if that benefits one person, then that was worth it. It wasn't doing any good by me keeping it to myself about what we did and what scenario we were in, because someone might be in the same position. They might be, ashamed of where they're at. They might have something they're struggling with, and they need the support from someone like yourself. So I would just tell them, don't be afraid to talk about it. It's a lot more normal of a subject, I guess, and it's not as bad as it seems.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's really what drives the show here, is that there are a lot more people in debt than anyone would realize. It is something that can be dealt with, even if we have to get to the point of discussing bankruptcy. It's something that can be dealt with. Credit recovers. There's a lot more people in debt than people realize. There's a lot more debt out there than people realize. And so I really appreciate you telling that story. And like I said, the whole purpose of the podcast, if I can help one person, I've got a lot more listeners than that and a lot more subscribers than that. But if I can help one person, then to me, the show and the episode is absolutely worth it. I do want to give you another opportunity. So again, it's NTP2 Photography. I assume you're here locally in the Tampa Bay area. Do you have a geography that you stick to for photography and video jobs?
So yeah, the business today is doing very well. We've been focusing on mainly commercial and marketing, photography and video. I always tell people I go where the work is. So if it works out, I do travel. We're starting to expand a little bit more. For the most part, it's Hillsborough County, a little bit in Pasco, a little bit in Pinellas, but we're starting to work with businesses to help them with their marketing content. And we're traveling to Pompano Beach now twice a year. We're traveling to hopefully into Georgia this year to start working with a new company. So it's starting to expand a little bit more. So really, if someone needs help with their marketing content and needs a creative eye to capture headshots, products, maybe do a video on their business, the distance, it doesn't bother me. I'll go and help someone.
Nice. And so again, if listeners are interested in seeing your work and your projects, it's NTP2 Photography, both on Facebook and Instagram. They can see examples of your work. I assume photos and videos, both.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Before I do want to give you
working on the TikTok channel. We're working on the TikTok.
I do want to give you an opportunity here a little bit to talk about PodFest and VidFest. But before we do, is there any other comments you want to add around around your story and NTP2 photography and debt and all that. Is there anything you want to add there, or you want to move on and talk about PodFest and VidFest?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it all. The basically, to sum it up, is, reach out to people that are in these various fields that can support you. Have someone that can help you with your debt. Have an attorney that can help you, advise you on these kind of things. Is really a great resource. Cool,
thank you. So, Rumi, PodFest and VidFest, we'll give Chris Kremitzos a plug here. It's podfestexpo.com. And as I understand, VidFest is sort of at the beginning of pre-PodFest, but it's all around video and video production and YouTube and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. Do you have your topic yet?
Yeah, my topic is basically... I've done training before on helping people to start shooting video. So basically, my topic is top 10 tips to start shooting video of what you have. Because it's easy to go out like a podcast, for example. Like, it's easy to go out and say, oh, you're going to start this. You have to buy this. You have to buy this. You have to buy this. And then it adds up really quick. And with video, it's really easy to just spend a ton of money on all kinds of things. But so basically my topic is about how to take those things that you have and to help you start, because you don't have to go buy a big $1,000 camera. Let's see what you have to work with, and let's get it started, because the content is important. And you're the one that actually told me this when I was starting my first podcast. Is I was doing all this back end planning, and you said, well, you've only forgotten one thing. I was like, what's that? What'd I forget? You forgot to hit record. You just need to start recording. Right. And that's it. That's it. You told me.
Yeah. People ask me, what's the best way to get started with a podcast? You just fire up the mic and start talking, dude. Let the rest of it, the rest of it will handle itself. I mean, I have all this equipment that I'm talking in today. Those of you that are watching the video, you see my mic sitting here, my headphones, all that other stuff. But yeah, I literally started talking into my iPhone to record. And actually, those first couple episodes, if someone really wants to dig into the Crushing Debt podcast, I think episodes like 1 through 5, I had laryngitis. But you and I both know Tiffany Kellogg, which has probably had something to do with us being introduced to each other, however far back. But I had made a commitment to Tiffany that I was going to get a certain number of episodes recorded and in the bank ready to release. And I was running up against the deadline of when I told her I would have that done. And so I hit the button and started recording. And I joke with people, those first 4, 5, 6 episodes are not Sean Yesner's super sexy voice. That is me with full on laryngitis. So,
but you did it.
Yeah, I got it knocked out. Well, cool. So again, if anyone's interested, I would highly suggest. I'm going to be at PodFest, which includes VidFest. It's in Orlando. I believe the date is, I know it ends right before Memorial Day. It ends the Sunday before Memorial Day. Hang on, let me see if I can.
Yeah, I believe it's the May 27th, May 26th through the 29th.
Thursday
to Sunday.
Yeah, Thursday, May 26th through Sunday the 29th is PodFest this year, 2022. Now, if you're listening to this after 2022, I would still go to podfestexpo.com. PodFest, this is our 7th, 8th, 9th year, something like that. Survived COVID. So I assume PodFest will continue on beyond 2022. So if you're listening after May of 2022, go to podfestexpo.com. You can find more information on upcoming PodFest there. And I know Chris is going to continue to do them both online and the live in person. So you can find out more information there. So, well, cool. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you being a guest. I really appreciate you sharing your story. And like I said, if it helps one person, then in my mind, the episode was successful. Not only you, but the episode as well.
Absolutely. Successful. Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.
Yeah. So anything else before we wrap up? Anything else before we sort of put a bow on this one?
Really about PodFest, I'm going to be out there probably Thursday to Saturday. So that's going to be fun. So if anyone is out there and you're listening to this, you want to come up and either meet me or meet Sean, love to check in with you and chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I love meeting with listeners and talking and whatnot. And hopefully you don't snore. Awesome.
I don't think I do. My wife says it just depends on how tired I am, but it's not a very consistent thing.
Okay. Well, I think I'm the same way, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think we should be good.
So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the month you have more money rather than at the end of the money you have more month. Thanks again to Eric Bunch for being on today's episode. Again, check him out, NTP2 Photography on Instagram and Facebook and soon to be TikTok. And that'll do it for this week's episode. And hopefully we will see you at PodFest and VidFest. And Eric, I'm sure I'll see you and talk to you later.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.